The Brazilian woman who was suspected of poisoning her family with an arsenic-laced cake has just been found dead in her jail cell. It is quite the update. We're going to bring on prison consultant Justin Paperny to discuss. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We have quite the update in a story that we recently covered. You might recall that we discussed this case out of Brazil of 42-year-old Deise Moura dos Anjos, who was arrested in connection with allegedly poisoning her family with a cake that authorities say was laced with arsenic. More precisely, that the flour had reportedly been tainted with high levels of arsenic. Now, Margette Mittman, the director of the General Institute of Expertise in Brazil, said during a news conference, this is not a natural contamination. The arsenic levels are so high that it's impossible to consider this anything but poisoning. 3 relatives ended up dead. 3 others ended up in the hospital. The victims, we have the suspect's mother-in-law, Zeli dos Anjos, survived, but Zeli's sisters, Maida Bernice Flores da Silva and Nueza Denise Silva dos Anjos, as well as Nuza's daughter, Tatiana Silva dos Santos, they died. They did not survive. And it's just quite unthinkable to think about this happening. And Tatiana's son, he became ill, as well as Maida's husband, Jefferson. And actually, to give you an idea of how sad this is, according to the outlet LBC, it's a British news outlet, Jefferson said, quote, "My other half is gone. I have to rebuild everything again. Sleeping is difficult. I didn't want to take sleeping pills, but I think I have to. At night, all that is left is a hole, and we were all having a great time." He went on to say that Maida loved these festive occasions, Christmas, New Year's, birthdays. She always enjoyed these. According to the BBC, the local police chief told the media that he was certain that the suspect here, Deise Moura dos Anjos, researched, bought, and used the poison to kill her victims, even indicating there was evidence that she had purchased the arsenic, had been doing research about this online. Now, to be clear, she denied having any involvement in this. But that's not even the end of the story, because it turns out she was apparently also being investigated for the death of her father-in-law, who died months before because he also reportedly had high levels of arsenic in his system after his body was exhumed. Now, I mentioned there's an update here. The suspect, Deise Moura dos Anjos, was found dead in her jail cell at an all-women's jail. According to reporting from outlets like LBC and BBC, authorities are investigating this as a suicide. And this jail is located in Guaíba. This is near Porto Alegre. According to the Daily Mail, regional police said in a statement, "We can confirm that during the morning roll call at the Guaíba State Women's Penitentiary, inmate Deise Moura dos Anjos was found without vital signs. The staff immediately gave her first aid and called the Emergency Medical Assistance Service, which on arriving at the scene confirmed her death." They say that she was alone in her cell, and the circumstances will be investigated by the civil police and the General Forensics Institute. Now, the Sun reports that Fernando Sodre, this is head of the Rio Grande do Sul State Police, said she left behind a note proclaiming her innocence. Quite the development. And I want to bring back in friend of the show, prison consultant Justin Paperny, to talk more about this. Justin, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. First of all, before we even get into all of the circumstances surrounding her death, just your thoughts on the alleged crimes here of poisoning family members.
We've covered a lot on this show, few to the extent of poisoning. It's deliberate, it's well thought through. Clearly, there's so much evidence that they can compile showing how she obtained it. There was some motive, revenge, financial, personal, that compelled her to deliberately plan out this crime. If she did it, some people, it's impulsive. They react in the moment. The government would have alleged this was a deliberately planned attack. And to go to that degree, to poison, and I texted people on your show, we've covered a lot of cases. This one is incredibly unusual because of the planning that goes into the alleged killing.
Pretty scary story, right? You want to hear something else that's scary? I didn't even know this, but we always try to alert you to what's going on out there. Did you know that scammers can steal your home right out from under you. Yeah, the FBI calls it house stealing, growing scam where criminals forge your signature. They transfer your home title without you knowing. They can take out loans. They can sell your property. You won't even realize it until it's too late. I mean, when was the last time you checked your home title? If you're like most, probably never. But that is why I trust our amazing partner and sponsor, Home Title Lock. They offer 24/7 monitoring, immediate alerts of any changes, and if fraud happens, they will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Right now, Home Title Lock is offering a free title history report and a personal title expert, a $250 value just for signing up. So visit HometitleLock.com, use our promo code Sidebar250 to get your protection today. There were photographs of this Christmas cake. It's like a traditional Brazilian cake, and there was nothing on the outside that would indicate there was something wrong with it. And to hear the descriptions from the survivors of this about the spicy flavor and how people started getting sick, it's so distressing. It's so unsettling to think about. And to talk about unsettling, I mean, now we have the death of the prime suspect. And according to the Daily Mail, reports are that this death was by hanging. What stands out to you about this?
Well, again, how deliberately she planned this attack, and even the state of her mind while people were consuming this cake, perhaps the enjoyment they were having, and then inside of her mind knowing what was coming for them. So we're dealing with someone that is not well. Clearly, there's mental health issues. When taken into the prison, they should have immediately put her on a sense of suicide watch 24 hours a day in that jacket, akin to what Luigi is enduring, because the makeup is clearly someone who may take their own life. So all ability for her to take her own life inside of the prison should have been removed. We're in a different country. They might not have the security level, the resources they want to, spend on this sort of case. But clearly she was very, very sick, and the only opportunity inside of that jail to take her own life was hanging herself. And it's a tragic, tragic case. They should have done more to ensure this couldn't happen, because it was very likely that it would happen or could happen.
I want to get to that. I am curious if she apparently left behind a note proclaiming her innocence. In cases where you see people who end up taking their own life from behind bars, is it, and tell me your thoughts on this one. We won't know for sure. Is it consciousness of guilt, or is it I'm innocent, no one's going to believe me, I'm being wrongly prosecuted, and I'm going to be spending the rest of my life behind bars unjustly? Where do you see it?
I don't think there's any middle. I think a note is either going to be, I did it, I'm sorry, I cannot spend the rest of my life in prison. It is too much pain knowing what I have caused. I'm sorry. Or I've been set up. It wasn't my fault. They're putting me out here as a scapegoat. I know I'm going to be convicted. It's a formality for that reason. I can't endure this experience any longer. Yeah, I didn't do it, but I can't endure the pain. It's either one or the other. If she did it, we'll never know. As you say, it looks as if she did. It would have been better for the family if she said, this is something that I did, and I'm sorry, and I wasn't well, and I wasn't thinking. And in a moment of revenge, I wanted to hurt people, and I did, and I just cannot endure the pain that I have caused. I see no other option. That probably would have been better than this option of, okay, I never did it.
How difficult is it for someone to hang themselves in a jail cell? And I know I don't know if you're familiar with this particular institution, but is that typical? How difficult is it to do that?
It's happened in every country around the world. Here's what we've learned: if someone is committed and they have an end in mind, and they see an opportunity, whether it's a sheet or a way to injure themselves inside of the prison, it's not that hard to do, which is part of the reason the prison should have taken more measures to remove anything she could use to hurt herself. And if that includes putting an armed guard inside or outside 24 hours a day to watch, like they should have done with Epstein, like they're doing with other high-profile prisoners, until at least a mental health assessment is done, saying, okay, she's okay, it doesn't have to be 24 hours. The prison system would argue it's expensive. We only have so much staff, and there's only so much we can control. So what's the cliche? Where there's a will, there is a way. That includes in prison, where people get very creative with what limited resources they have to cook, to clean, to exercise, to take their own life. Just because they're in prison don't mean they're not creative.
Do you see a disparity in male prisons or male jails versus female jails? Do we see this happen in both?
We see it happen in both. I think as a male that's been to prison, I think it's easier. There's probably more accepted that a man would go to prison. We've had so many female clients go to prison, primarily white collar crime, and they're looked at a little differently inside of the prison, even treated differently from staff, because I just think there's more of a perception of a man serving time versus a woman, even though so many more women are going to prison for all sorts of crimes. You see it amongst male, female, immediately upon going to prison, to the extent they could do mental health counseling or an assessment and put someone on a treatment plan. We think staff should have that as well. It's very difficult to work in a prison environment. So they too may say things that could trigger the prisoner. So there has to be training on both ends.
And they give you another factor to consider here. So the Daily Mail reported that her husband had informed her he wanted a divorce, apparently sent a lawyer to the jail just 24 hours before she was found dead. If she really did do this, if she really did take her own life, how do you think something like that process is, how does that affect a defendant?
So when you're in prison, it's very easy to continuously get bad news financially, professionally. You're looking at 10, 20, 30 life in prison. So she has all these cascading factors. And it might have got to a point where she says, I see absolutely no way out. And that simply could have been the final straw. You could argue she was teetering, right? Accused of murder, a horrific crime. She's in this very difficult environment looking at life in prison. And it could also be like one more thing gets added onto this. That's a wrap. The divorce notice could have been the final thing. You find the opportunity. She takes her own life, and to appear as if she's innocent or somehow being set up. She leaves a note that does nothing to really help the family somehow, some way try to heal. She says, I didn't do it. It's a really tragic, sickening, unfortunate experience. And I feel for the remaining victims and all they're going to endure, because she's gone, but their lives are forever. The legacy of this family for generations to come is forever changed as a result of this alleged act.
Oh, and let's keep that in mind, because we have an interesting reaction to this. So I don't know how much you know about Brazilian jails or Brazilian prisons, but would somebody like her who allegedly committed a crime that, I mean, it made headlines around the world, would she have had a target on her back? You mentioned that this jail should have done more. Do you think her life might have been in danger?
Potentially. What some prisoners don't like is a disruption in their routine. So if someone's adjusted, they have their exercise, their meals, their programming, and then a new prisoner comes in, which could bring more scrutiny from staff, oversight, that could lead to a disruption. For that reason, some prisoners, new prisoners, could be made an example of. It's oftentimes where they will keep a Diddy or Luigi or Epstein or others in isolation. They can't risk the fallout that would come if something were to happen to them. So certainly I think there was more scrutiny as this went global. And for that reason, she was more isolated perhaps than she would have been with other prisoners. And that isolation for some, especially if you've never been in that environment before, can be so emotionally devastating. I can't handle it. There's no way out of there. That's why I've said on your show before, when some people go from a detention center like an MDC to a minimum security camp, even a lower or medium, they feel like they've gone to Disneyland because they feel free. She was enduring the hardest part of that incarceration, and it was just too much for her to bear.
Again, assuming that's what the results of the investigation conclude, because that's what I wanted to ask you too. Apparently, the reporting indicates there are separate investigations, I guess. You have one by the police, law enforcement, and one by the prison separately. In these kinds of situations where you have an inmate or detainee who is killed, who dies, who's injured, what does that investigation look like on the part of the prison and maybe also law enforcement?
Certainly they're working together, and it's in their interest to wrap this up as quickly as possible. And these reports from the prisons tend to confirm that they did everything they were supposed to do to protect her, and to the extent that they can keep her in an isolated, safe environment, they could. But at the end of the day, as I said earlier, prison provides opportunities, even with so many things removed and restricted. And she clearly, the government or the prison system will allege, was committed to following through on this. And there's only so much they're able to do, is what the report, I suspect, will say. I even read reports this morning that the investigation makes clear this is something they did. Certainly they're not going to come out and say they did anything wrong, but the police and the prison system are working closely together. They want to get this wrapped up and move on to another case.
Do you usually see changes in the detention center or jail or prison after a violent episode like this?
Certainly, once they reverse engineer the entire process, there could be some new protocols they'll put in place. I think they did that with Epstein. The problem is there wasn't enough accountability in that case. So if there was any breakdown here, to the extent they're willing to share that information, I suspect they'll put some new protocols in place moving forward. And it could just simply be how many eyes were on her. I mean, if there was a little break, because clearly someone wasn't watching her when they did this, telling me she might have been in isolation, but it was a regular shift, right? Where she's alone in that cell to do what she liked. The change could be when we have a case like this with this sort of mental health condition, it's going to require 24-hour-a-day scrutiny. And the prison system will say, there's only so much we can do. There's only so much money we have.
By the way, before I get to a reaction that I wanted to get to, because I want your perspective on it. Generally speaking, would you say for somebody who gets locked up, charged with a crime, they're in a jail, they're in a detention center, is it the first month is the hardest? Is it the first 2 months, the first 3 months? Do you see these kinds of situations where people take their own lives relatively soon after they are incarcerated, as opposed to somebody, a year down the line, 2 years down the line? Because one of the things that I've learned from speaking with you, and this is not a shock, is how much that is a reality check for people. Their whole world has changed. And now in this new environment, how they're going to operate, how they're going to live, can be a very scary and distressing and depressing situation. So do you see it maybe the first weeks, the first few months are the toughest?
Yes, the earlier days tend to be the easiest. It's a new environment. You may convince yourself, I'm going to get out. I've been wronged. So it's fresh. It's emotional. It goes very quickly. And then you get some bad news. You're not going to get bond. You get some bad news. They're looking at life in prison. The reality of the situation begins to set in. I cannot undo what I've done. So maybe it's a week, it's 3 weeks, a month where this is my reality. This is my life. This is how frequently, this is where I eat. This is the food. This is the way that I'm going to live. This is my new environment. So it's not those early days. It's 3 weeks or a month when it's like, my goodness, this may be the rest of my life. I would do anything to go back and change it, but do-overs don't exist in life. And that's very difficult to set in, whether it's 3 years in a minimum security camp for a measly white collar crime. 3 years, I can't do it. In this case, we're looking at, it would have been the rest of her life in prison, and not in an environment like a minimum security camp or even a low security prison here in America. This is in a foreign prison, at least as we see it. It's not going to have the amenities, the education, the program, the health care that she was used to. And it sets in and she says, you know what, that's a wrap.
I want your reaction to something. So according to the Daily Mail, Jefferson, who's one of the victims in this case, he survived, but Jefferson's sister, Isabel Moraes, reportedly said, "We are astonished by the news. We have only just heard. How can this happen? Someone should have been watching her, and it's just reliving the tragedy of what happened to my brother and the rest of the family all over again. She may have avoided justice now, but hopefully in the next life she is being punished for all the evil and misery she caused us. What really hurts everyone is that her son will grow up without a mother, but if this is the type of woman she was, then maybe it's for the better." Your thoughts on that, Justin?
So the prison's going to say there's only so much security we can do, right? And now, as I said earlier, because she didn't accept responsibility, she took her own life without being held accountable in a court of law. The pain is simply going to continue for this family, the true victims of this crime. She is angry and making these statements because she didn't get resolution. She didn't get finality. And it would have brought her such joy to be at a sentencing hearing, to hear her get sentenced to life in prison, and to know that she's going to suffer for years and years to come. Instead, she feels she took the easy way out. And now this woman who made this comment and the rest of their family are left to endure the pain and fallout from her actions. It's very difficult when you don't have clarity in life, or when you don't have resolution and you feel as if you've been cheated. And that's how she feels right now.
Generally speaking, I'm not saying this is what she was advocating or what she was saying, but there are those who will look at this story and look at other stories, and the Jeffrey Epstein story, and for people who were never convicted, but they were charged with serious crimes and the evidence looks really bad, or even those who were convicted, they'll say whether they take their own life in prison or somebody kills them in prison, it's a form of street justice in a way. That is not the purpose of prison, though. What would be your perspective on that?
Everyone's entitled to do justice, and there should be security in the institution, but there's also some sense of personal responsibility, right? The prison system only has so many resources. You can't just keep your eyes on someone 24 hours a day. At some point, it's not sustainable. So while prison is meant to confine and in time rehabilitate, it's a very violent environment, a predatory environment. And people, even though they're in prison, can be very creative, smart, shrewd, think criminally. And if they are convinced they have no way out, and you look hard enough, it's like I tell people committing a white-collar crime, you really want to find a way, you're going to find a way. You can do that even when you're isolated 24 hours a day. It's a very unfortunate experience, and there'll be some conspiracy theories, I presume. There already are. And again, I feel terrible for the family to not have the justice they solely desire is very painful for them.
You think about what this family went through in the past 6 months is just really unthinkable. Such a sad situation. And we'll see where this investigation goes. But Justin Paperny, always love having you on. You give incredible perspective and insight into an environment and a situation that we don't always completely understand. So appreciate you, and thank you for coming back here on Sidebar.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.